Lena Russ noticed the whiskey glass appear in 5 seconds flat, and in those 5 seconds, she knew someone at table 12 was about to die. The crystal tumbler sat perfectly centered on the white linen, catching the warm glow from the chandelier overhead. Every other drink had been delivered by her or another server. This one materialized while she turned to refill water at table 9. Someone who wasn't staff had placed it there, someone who knew exactly where Louis Powell would reach, someone who wanted him dead. She kept her expression neutral as she approached with her tray balanced on her left hand. 7 months of hiding had taught her that survival meant seeing everything while appearing to notice nothing. The upscale Italian restaurant hummed with low conversation and the gentle clink of silverware against fine china. Soft opera floated from speakers hidden in the crown molding. Most people saw sophistication. Lena saw a tactical map. Louis Powell sat at the center of table 12 like a king surveying his territory. His charcoal suit probably cost more than she earned in 3 months. The way he carried himself, relaxed but alert, casual but in control, told her he was a man who'd survived by trusting his instincts. The 2 men flanking him were clearly lieutenants. The one on his left kept scanning the room. The one on his right had the build of someone who handled problems with his hands. But none of them saw what she saw. The condensation pattern on the whiskey glass was wrong, too uniform. The ice cubes sat too still, arranged too deliberately. The liquid caught the light at a different angle than the wine glasses surrounding it, and the placement, exactly 3 inches from the edge, perfectly aligned with the knife, broke every unspoken rule of Bellissimo's service protocol. Lena's pulse didn't change. Her breathing stayed even. Years of field training had burned one truth into her reflexes. Panic gets you killed. Precision keeps you breathing. She had maybe 10 seconds before Louis reached that glass. 10 seconds to decide if she was still the woman who walked away from violence, or if she was about to step back into the world she'd spent 7 months trying to forget. The amber liquid sat there, beautiful and lethal, waiting. Louis shifted in his seat, his hand moving toward the table. 5 seconds. Lena adjusted her grip on the tray and made her choice. She crossed the dining room floor with measured steps, her server's smile firmly in place. To anyone watching, she was simply doing her job, checking on table 12, ensuring the city's most dangerous regular was satisfied. Her black vest and white shirt made her invisible, just another piece of the restaurant's elegant machinery. But her mind was running calculations. Angle of approach, position of the bodyguards, sightlines from the kitchen, the weight distribution of her tray, the exact motion required to lift the tainted glass while simultaneously placing a clean replacement from her service station prep. She'd executed more complicated maneuvers in darker places. "Good evening, Mr. Powell," she said, her voice pleasant and forgettable. "May I refresh your setup?" She didn't wait for an answer. Her right hand moved with practiced efficiency, lifting the crystal tumbler as if checking its level. Her left hand smoothly placed a fresh glass from her tray, this one containing whiskey she'd personally poured 30 seconds ago. The swap took less than 2 seconds. Her body shielded the movement from the table's view. Louis Powell's eyes flicked up to meet hers, and in that fraction of a second, Lena knew he'd seen it. Not the full motion, but enough. The slight irregularity in her service pattern, the unnecessary touch, the deviation from routine. His gaze held hers for a heartbeat. She saw the calculation happening behind those dark eyes, the same threat assessment she'd just performed. He was a man who'd built an empire by noticing what others missed, and he'd just noticed her. Lena didn't flinch, didn't explain, didn't break character. She simply gave a small, professional nod and stepped back. "Enjoy your evening, sir." She turned and walked toward the service station, the tainted glass secure on her tray, her heart rate still perfectly controlled. Behind her, she felt his stare burning into her back. Louis Powell didn't touch the fresh whiskey, and Lena Russ knew that her 7 months of invisibility had just ended. The question now wasn't whether he'd figure out what she'd done. Men like Louis Powell always figured it out. The question was what he'd do when he realized the forgettable waitress in the black vest had just saved his life without saying a single word.
If you're gripped by this high-stakes game of cat and mouse, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 2,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this, about hidden strength and dangerous secrets, deserve to be heard. Help me show her these tales matter. Please subscribe. Now, let's go back to where Lena's disappearance began.
Lena had perfected the art of being forgotten. It was a skill more valuable than marksmanship, more reliable than any dead drop. Every morning she woke up in her studio apartment above the dry cleaner, brewed coffee in a machine she'd bought at a thrift store, and walked the same route to Bellissimo. She clocked in at exactly 4:47 p.m. She smiled at the hostess. She tied her apron. She disappeared. This was survival, not the kind taught in training facilities with rubber mats and tactical instructors, but the kind that kept you breathing when your former employers had a policy of tying up loose ends. For 7 months, Lena Russ had been the most ordinary woman in the world. It was exhausting. The shift started like every other. Lena moved through the dining room with her tray, her face a mask of professional pleasantness, but her eyes never stopped working. Table 4. The Russian businessman with the Rolex and the nervous laugh. His bodyguard stood near the bar, jacket tailored to hide the shoulder holster on his left side. Left-handed draw. Former military, possibly Spetsnaz based on his posture. He'd clocked Lena twice already, dismissing her as irrelevant. Good. Table 8. The couple celebrating an anniversary that wasn't theirs. She wore a wedding ring, he didn't. They sat too close, touched too often, and kept glancing at the entrance. Classic affair behavior. They'd be gone by dessert, paying in cash. Table 11. New party of 4. Investment bankers by their watches, drug dealers by their eyes. The briefcase under the table hadn't moved since they sat down. She gave them 40 minutes before someone from Louis Powell's organization had a conversation about operating in his territory. In the back, Marka worked the pasta station with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to cook in a place where mistakes had consequences. Lena had spotted the prison tattoo on his second day, a faded mark on his forearm he thought the chef's jacket covered. San Quentin, if she remembered the design correctly. He'd done time for something violent, something that taught him to move with his back to the wall and his eyes on the door. He nodded at her when she dropped off orders. She nodded back. Two people who understood that some pasts were better left unexamined. Lena refilled water glasses and recited specials and cleared plates. She laughed at jokes she didn't find funny. She accepted tips with gratitude she didn't feel. She became wallpaper with a pulse. This was the deal she'd made with herself. Stay small, stay quiet, stay alive. Let the world forget you existed. Let the people who trained you to kill believe you'd already been eliminated. Trade a life of purpose for a life of safety. It was working. Until the whiskey glass appeared at table 12, and Lena learned that some instincts refuse to die. Louis Powell had stayed alive for 32 years in a business where most men died before 40. The secret wasn't brutality. Plenty of brutal men ended up in shallow graves. The secret was attention, noticing the waiter who hesitated before pouring wine, the business partner who started wearing expensive watches, the silence that lasted 2 seconds too long during a phone call. Details kept you breathing. Paranoia kept you powerful. He arrived at Bellissimo every Thursday at 7:15, always through the front entrance, never the same car twice. Marcus walked 3 steps behind him on the left, hand always near his jacket. Chen followed on the right, eyes scanning the room before Louis crossed the threshold. This wasn't security theater. This was how you survived 3 decades of making enemies. The hostess smiled like he was just another customer. Louis appreciated the performance. He'd paid enough over the years to ensure his regular table stayed regular, that the staff knew his preferences without asking, that certain conversations at table 12 would never be overheard or remembered. He'd chosen Bellissimo carefully, high-end enough to attract the kind of people who minded their business, expensive enough to keep out amateurs, Italian-owned, which meant a certain understanding about family matters and discretion. The owner, Giuseppe, had roots in Naples. They understood each other. Marcus pulled out Louis's chair. Chen took the seat with the clear view of both entrances and the kitchen. Louis sat with his back to the wall, a habit formed in rooms far less elegant than this one.
Tomasini's people are getting nervous, Marcus said, voice low. They think the waterfront deal favors us too heavily. Louis didn't respond immediately. He never did. Rushed words were careless words. Instead, he scanned the dining room with practiced efficiency. The Russian at table 4 with his obvious muscle, the affair couple paying too much attention to each other, investment bankers at table 11 who didn't know they were 10 minutes from being asked to leave. Everything as it should be. Tomasini's people are always nervous, Louis said finally. That's why they work for Tomasini instead of being Tomasini. What does Marco say? Chen checked his phone. He confirms. They're pushing for renegotiation. Louis considered this. Marco was embedded in Tomasini's organization, had been for 8 months. Good man. Careful. If Marco said they were nervous, they were nervous. But something felt off. Louis couldn't name it, not yet. It was the same instinct that made him change restaurants the night someone tried to poison his predecessor, the same instinct that told him to decline a meeting that ended with 4 bodies in a warehouse. His grandfather used to call it the whisper, the thing you felt before you knew what you were feeling. He'd learned to trust it absolutely. We'll discuss it after dinner. For now, he stopped. His eyes caught movement near the bar, a waitress turning away from table 9, heading in their direction. Brunette, young, forgettable. He'd seen her here before, maybe a dozen times. She'd never registered as significant. But tonight, something in the way she moved made that whisper start again. Louis leaned back in his chair and waited.
Lena counted steps, 12 from the service station to table 12. Each one calculated, each one measured. Her breathing stayed deep and even. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. Combat breathing, the kind that kept your hands steady when adrenaline wanted them shaking. The tray weighed exactly 6 pounds, including the fresh whiskey glass she'd poured 30 seconds ago. She'd positioned it on the left side, within easy reach of her dominant hand. The tainted glass sat 3 inches from Louis Powell's right hand. She had maybe 5 seconds before he reached for it. Her training supervisor's voice echoed in her memory. Speed draws attention. Smoothness creates invisibility. She approached from the left, angling her body to block Marcus's sightline. The lieutenant was watching the entrance, not the table. Good. Chen's eyes were on his phone. Better. Louis himself was mid-sentence, his attention on Marcus. 4 seconds. "Good evening, Mr. Powell," Lena said, her voice carrying just enough warmth to be professional, not enough to be memorable. "May I refresh your setup?" She didn't wait for permission. That would create hesitation, and hesitation created questions. Her right hand moved first, reaching for the tainted glass as if checking its level. The motion looked casual, routine, a server ensuring the customer had enough to drink. But her fingers registered everything: the temperature of the crystal, the weight distribution, the faint chemical residue on the rim that most people would never detect. Military grade, tasteless, fast-acting. 3 seconds. Her left hand simultaneously lifted the clean glass from her tray, the movement hidden by her torso. She pivoted slightly, her body becoming a wall between the table and the rest of the room. To anyone watching, she was simply adjusting glassware. Her vest and white shirt made the motion blend into the restaurant's elegant machinery. 2 seconds. The swap happened in the space between heartbeats. Tainted glass up, clean glass gown. Same position, same angle, same distance from the edge. Her muscle memory operated on a level beyond conscious thought. Thousands of hours of training compressed into a single fluid motion. 1 second. Her face stayed neutral, professional smile, soft eyes. But beneath the surface, her body was a controlled system of tension. Her jaw remained loose to prevent teeth clenching. Her shoulders stayed relaxed to avoid telegraphing stress. Even her pupils maintained their normal dilation, a trick that had taken months to master. The tainted glass settled onto her tray without a sound. She straightened, ready to step back. That's when she saw it, the reflection in Louis Powell's water glass, her hand visible for a fraction of a second at the wrong angle, just a flicker of movement that shouldn't have been there. Louis's eyes snapped up. His gaze locked onto hers with the precision of a man who'd spent 30 years noticing the things that didn't fit. She watched his pupils contract slightly, his breathing pause, his entire being focus on the woman standing at his table.
The air between them changed, thinned, became charged with unspoken understanding. Lena didn't flinch, didn't explain, didn't break character. She gave a small, professional nod. "Enjoy your evening, sir." She turned and walked toward the service station, every step controlled, every muscle locked into the performance of normalcy. Behind her, she felt his stare like a physical weight, and she knew, absolutely knew, that Louis Powell understood exactly what she'd just done.
Louis didn't touch the whiskey. His hand stopped 2 inches from the glass, hovering in space while his mind processed what his instincts had already screamed at him. The waitress walked away with perfect posture, perfect pace, perfect anonymity. But Louis had survived 3 decades by seeing beneath surfaces, and beneath that forgettable exterior, he'd just witnessed something that shouldn't exist. The fluidity of her movement, not the practiced grace of a server, but the efficiency of someone trained to move through tactical situations. Her pivot had been military, using her body to block sightlines, creating a blind spot that lasted exactly as long as she needed it. The positioning, she'd approached him from his left side, cutting Marcus out of the equation without Marcus even noticing. She'd known where Chan would be looking before she took her first step. That wasn't luck, that was reconnaissance. And the threat assessment, she'd identified something at his table that neither of his security men had caught, something Louis himself hadn't seen until she'd moved. Someone had placed a drink he didn't order. "Marcus," Louis said quietly, his eyes still tracking the waitress as she reached the service station. "The glass on her tray, the one she just removed from my table. Secure it, carefully. I want it tested within the hour." Marcus's expression didn't change, but his posture shifted, alert now, dangerous. "Sir? Do it quietly. Don't touch the rim. Don't let anyone see you taking it." Chen's hand moved toward his jacket, instinct preparing for threats. Louis shook his head once. "Not yet, just the glass." Marcus stood smoothly, adjusting his cufflinks, a signal to the men stationed near the bar. Within 30 seconds, the operation was in motion. No one in the dining room would notice, but the glass would be gone before the waitress cleared her next table. Louis leaned back in his chair, his mind running calculations. Someone had gotten close enough to place poison, and it was poison, he was certain now, on his table, in his restaurant, surrounded by his people. That meant the threat was internal, close, already inside his defenses. And a waitress he'd never paid attention to had stopped it. The math didn't work. Servers didn't have that kind of training. They didn't move like operators. They didn't assess threats and neutralize them without breaking stride. Unless they weren't really servers at all. Unless they were something else. Louis's eyes found her across the dining room. She was refilling water glasses at table 6, her face a mask of professional pleasantness. But as if feeling his stare, she looked up. Their eyes met again. This time there was no accident, no reflected movement. This was deliberate, a moment of acknowledgement between 2 people who understood exactly what had just happened. Louis saw recognition in her gaze, not fear, not confusion, recognition. She knew he knew, and she wasn't running. Louis offered the smallest nod, barely a movement at all, just enough. The waitress, Lena, he would learn her name within the hour, returned the gesture, equally subtle, equally precise. Then she turned back to table 6 and the moment ended. But Louis Powell had made a career of reading people, of seeing the truth beneath careful lies, and the truth was undeniable. The most dangerous person in Bellissimo tonight wasn't sitting at any table. She was carrying a tray of water glasses and wearing a name tag that said Lena. The question now was why. Marcus called at 2 in the morning. Louis was awake, as Marcus knew he would be. Men in their line of work didn't sleep well. "The glass came back positive," Marcus said without preamble. "Rice and derivative, modified compound. Our chemist says it's military grade, maybe intelligence community. Tasteless, odorless, fast-acting. You'd have been dead in 6 hours. Looked like a heart attack." Louis stood at his penthouse window, the city spread below him like a game board. And the waitress? A pause. That pause told Louis everything he needed to know. "That's where it gets interesting," Marcus continued. "Lena Russ, 26 years old according to her driver's license, social security number checks out, legitimate, not stolen. Employment history is clean, references verified, background check came back clear. But, Lewis prompted, but it's too clean, like someone built it instead of lived it. Chen arrived at the penthouse 30 minutes later with a tablet full of data. Lewis poured them both coffee, his own hands, his own pot. Trust only went so far at 3 in the morning. Her social security number was issued 7 months ago, Chen said, swiping through documents. Not reactivated, not transferred, issued, like she didn't exist before that. Lewis studied the information. Lena Russ had an apartment lease, utility bills, a bank account with regular deposits from Bellissimo. She had a library card, a gym membership, car insurance on a 10-year-old Honda. It was a life, complete and detailed, and utterly false. Digital footprint? Lewis asked. Nothing. No social media, no old email accounts, no photos tagged by friends. Most people her age have thousands of digital breadcrumbs. She has 0. That's not absence, Lewis said quietly. That's erasure. Chen nodded. Professional erasure, the kind that costs money and expertise. Someone scrubbed her past so thoroughly that the only thing left is what they wanted us to find. Lewis walked to his office safe and pulled out a file he'd been building for 6 months. Names, movements, whispers of discontent within his organization. Someone had been making plays, testing boundaries, building towards something. Now that something had manifested as poison in a crystal glass. The waitress didn't plant it, Lewis said, more to himself than Chen. She stopped it, which means she's not with them. Or she's playing a deeper game, Chen offered. Lewis considered this. In his experience, deep games involved complexity, misdirection, multiple layers. What he'd witnessed at Bellissimo was the opposite: direct action, clean execution, immediate results. No, he said, finally. She's not playing, she's hiding. Chen raised an eyebrow. From who? From whoever trained her to move like that, to see threats before they materialize, to build an identity that good. Lewis closed the file. Someone invested significant resources in making Lena Russ, and she walked away from them. People like that don't let assets walk away, Chen said. No, Lewis agreed. The ricin derivative sat in a locked evidence bag on Lewis's desk. Military grade, intelligence community, nearly undetectable. Someone inside his organization had access to that kind of weapon, someone close enough to reach his table, and a ghost with a serving tray saved his life. Lewis made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone who didn't understand the rules of survival. He needed to find Lena Russ before his enemies did, because whoever she was running from was now the least of her problems. Lena arrived at Bellissimo 2 hours before her shift, using the delivery entrance as she always did. The morning manager barely looked up. Invisible again, exactly as she needed to be. The security office was on the 2nd floor, tucked behind the wine cellar. She'd mapped it during her first week, noting the outdated camera system, the single monitor, the manager who took smoke breaks every 40 minutes. Giuseppe ran an excellent restaurant, but his security was theater, not substance. She picked the lock in 8 seconds. The footage was digital but poorly archived. She found Thursday's recording and began the tedious work of watching herself work. Fast forward through the early shift, slow down at 7:15 when Louis Powell arrived, frame by frame through the critical window. There, 7:23 p.m. She was at table 9, her back to table 12. The angle showed Louis's table clearly, empty except for wine glasses and water. Chen checked his phone. Marcus scanned the room. Then, for exactly 5 seconds, 3 staff members moved simultaneously. Marco emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray. Another server crossed toward the bar. The hostess walked past with menus. When they cleared, the whiskey glass was on Louis's table. Lena rewound and watched again. This time, she focused on the blind spots. The 3 moving bodies created a wall between the camera and table 12, perfectly timed, professionally executed. This wasn't luck. This was planning. She pulled up the previous 4 Thursdays. Same pattern, 7:15 arrival, same table, same positioning. Someone had been studying Louis's routine, mapping the restaurant's rhythms, identifying the exact moment when cameras and eyes would be elsewhere. The precision made her stomach tighten. This is how she used to work, how she'd been trained to work. Lena spent 3 hours cross-referencing staff schedules, table assignments, and Louis's known associates. The glass had to be placed by someone with access to table 12 during that 5-second window, someone who could move through the dining room without drawing attention, someone close to Louis's organization to know his schedule. 3 names emerged: Dominic Torello, Louis's business associate, present at table 12 every Thursday, connected to the Torello family, old money with new ambitions. He'd arrived early last night, before Louis, had access to the table unsupervised for nearly 10 minutes. Vincent Marconi, regular customer, but too regular, always dining within sight of Louis's table. Former military according to the way he carried himself. His credit cards traced back to a shell company with no legitimate business operations. Angela Russo, night manager at Bellissimo. She'd worked here for 3 years, knew every server's pattern, every camera's blind spot. Her brother had been killed in a territory dispute last year, a dispute Louis had orchestrated. Motive, means, opportunity. Lena saved the footage to a thumb drive and wiped the security system's access logs. Ghost protocols. She'd done this 100 times before, in places far more sophisticated than an Italian restaurant's outdated security office. But this time felt different. This time, she wasn't gathering intelligence for an agency that would use it to eliminate targets. This time, she was trying to prevent more death, not cause it. She checked her watch, 40 minutes until shift started, enough time to return to the locker room, change into her uniform, and become invisible again. But as she locked the security office door behind her, Lena knew invisibility was no longer an option. Someone had tried to kill Louis Powell, and now both of them were hunting the same predator. Louis Powell arrived on Saturday night, alone. No Marcus, no Chen, no security visible anywhere in the restaurant. He walked through the front entrance at 8:30, spoke briefly with the hostess, and was seated in Lena's section, table 6, not his usual spot. Lena felt her pulse tick up exactly 3 beats per minute. Controlled response. Manageable. She picked up a menu and water glass and approached with the same professional smile she'd worn for 7 months. "Good evening, Mr. Powell." "Good evening, Lena." He used her name. Deliberate. "I hope you don't mind the last-minute reservation." "Not at all." She placed the water glass with precise alignment. "Will anyone be joining you tonight?" "No, just me." His eyes held hers for a beat longer than necessary. "I'm in the mood for something different." Lena opened the wine list, her hands steady. "We have an excellent selection. Are you familiar with our inventory?" "I thought I was." Louis leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed, or appearing to be. "But I'm discovering there are things here I never noticed before." "Sometimes the most interesting options are the ones that don't draw attention to themselves," Lena said smoothly. "Precisely." Louis smiled slightly. "Though I find that once you notice them, it's difficult to look away." She met his gaze. The subtext was so thick she could taste it. He knew, she knew, he knew. They were past pretense now. "The 2015 Barolo is particularly good, complex, layers that reveal themselves slowly, but it requires patience." "I have patience." Louis studied her face, like he was reading a classified document. "Though I'm curious, does it pair well with secrets?" "That depends on the secrets, sir. The kind that save lives, for instance." Lena closed the wine list. They were done with metaphors. "You shouldn't be here alone," she said quietly, her voice pitched so only he could hear. "Whoever placed that glass is still out there, still close to you." "I'm aware." Louis's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. "Which is why I'm sitting in your section. You saw the threat when my own people didn't. That makes you either very dangerous or very valuable." "Or both." "Or both," he agreed. "So I'll ask you directly, who trained you?" "I'll ask you directly, who wants you dead?" A moment of silence. Then Louis laughed, low and genuine. "You're good at this." "So are you." "I could offer you protection," he said. resources, a way out of whatever you're running from. I don't need protection. Lena's tone was flat, final. I need to be left alone. That's not going to happen now. You know that. She did know that. The moment she'd swapped that glass, she'd stepped out of the shadows. There was no going back to invisible. 3 people had access, Lena said, making a decision that terrified and liberated her simultaneously. Torello, Marconi, or Russo, each with motive. I can narrow it down further, but I need more information. Luis's eyes widened fractionally. Surprise. Respect. You've already been investigating. You're not the only one who pays attention, Mr. Powell. He was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, call me Louis, and I think we need to have a much longer conversation than this restaurant allows. I think, Lena said carefully, that would be dangerous for both of us. Everything worth doing is dangerous. Louis pulled a card from his jacket and placed it on the table. Private number. When you're ready. He stood, leaving cash for a meal he hadn't ordered. Lena watched him walk out, the cards sitting on the white tablecloth like a loaded gun. She had 48 hours before her next shift, 48 hours to decide if she was still running or if she was finally ready to stand her ground. I know that feeling, that moment when you have to choose between safety and the truth. If this story is hitting home for you, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, would you trust a man like Louis Powell? Your answers keep these stories alive. Now, the night everything burns. The inventory room smelled like cardboard and wine. Lena was counting bottles of Chianti when she heard it. 2 soft pops, barely louder than champagne corks. But she knew that sound. Suppressed gunfire. 9mm, probably subsonic rounds. Her body reacted before her mind caught up. She set down the clipboard silently and moved to the door. Through the crack, she saw Angela Russo's body crumpled near the hostess stand, 2 entry wounds center mass. Professional. Execution style. The tactical team moved through the dining room like smoke. 4 operators, all in black, faces covered. They communicated with hand signals, clearing corners with the efficiency of military training. High-end contractors, not street thugs. And they were moving toward the private dining room where Louis Powell was finishing paperwork. Lena had 3 seconds to make the decision that would define the rest of her life. Run. The delivery exit was 15 feet away. She could be gone before they cleared the kitchen, disappear into the city, build a new identity, survive. Or fight. Reveal everything she'd spent 7 months hiding, become visible, become a target again. Louis Powell wasn't her mission, wasn't her responsibility. He was a stranger who happened to notice her in the wrong moment. But he'd also sat alone in her section, trusting her with his life. He'd offered protection without demanding answers. He'd recognized what she was and hadn't flinched. Lena reached for the fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. 3 seconds was up. She moved like water. The first operator cleared the kitchen entrance, weapon raised. Lena swung the fire extinguisher in a precise arc, connecting with his weapon hand. Bones cracked. The suppressed pistol clattered to the floor. She followed with an elbow to his throat, collapsing his windpipe before he could call out. 1 down. 23 seconds. She scooped up his weapon, Glock 19 with custom suppressor, and checked the magazine. 15 rounds. She dropped the unconscious operator and moved toward the dining room, staying low, using tables for cover. The second operator appeared near the bar. Lena fired twice, center mass. Both hits. He dropped without a sound. 2 down. 23 seconds. The remaining 2 operators reacted instantly, taking cover and returning fire. Rounds punched through tablecloths and shattered wine glasses. Lena rolled behind the bar, her training flooding back like muscle memory. Calculate angles, count rounds, identify cover versus concealment. She grabbed a wine bottle and threw it high, creating distraction. When the third operator tracked the movement, she leaned out and fired 3 rounds. Headshot. He went down hard. 3 down, 58 seconds. The fourth operator was smarter. He'd taken position near the private dining room door, using Louis as a shield. Through the chaos, Lena saw Louis pressed against the wall, unarmed but alert, his eyes tracking her movement across the destroyed restaurant. "Come out," the operator called, "or I go through this door." Lena stood slowly, weapon aimed, her breathing steady despite the adrenaline. "You won't make it to the handle. Neither will you, whoever you are."
I'm the person who's going to kill you if you don't put down the weapon. Her voice was ice, pure, professional, the voice of someone who'd done this before. The operator hesitated. Fatal mistake. Lena fired once, perfect shot through the narrow gap between his helmet and vest. He dropped. 4 down, 59 seconds total. Silence fell over Bellissimo like ash. Lena stood in the center of the dining room, surrounded by unconscious and dead operators, the Glock still raised, her server's uniform soaked with someone else's blood. The private dining room door opened. Louis Powell stepped out, his eyes moving from the bodies to her face, cataloging the transformation from invisible waitress to lethal operator. "Lena," he said quietly, "I think we need to have that conversation now."
Lena lowered the weapon slowly, muscle memory performing a tactical assessment as even exhaustion threatened to pull her under. 4 hostiles neutralized, 1 civilian casualty, restaurant compromised, extraction window closing. But she wasn't extracting. There was nowhere to extract to. Louis stepped carefully through the wreckage of his favorite restaurant, his eyes never leaving her face, not looking at the bodies, not cataloging the damage, just watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're not surprised," Lena said. "It wasn't a question. I stopped being surprised 3 days ago when you swapped a poisoned glass without breaking stride." Louis stopped a few feet away, close enough to speak quietly, far enough to give her space. "Though I'll admit this is more impressive than I anticipated. They were coming for you." "I know, thank you." The simple gratitude nearly broke something in her chest. No interrogation, no demands for explanation, just acknowledgement. "We have maybe 10 minutes before police arrive. Marcus is already handling the security footage. Chen is creating a narrative that doesn't involve you. As far as anyone will know, I was alone when unknown assailants attacked. They were unsuccessful." Lena stared at him. "Why?" "Because you just saved my life. Again." Louis pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke 3 words, "Clean team, now," and hung up. "And because whatever you're running from, whoever trained you to move like that, I have resources to help. You don't know what you're offering. I know exactly what I'm offering." His voice was steel wrapped in silk. "I've lived in shadows my entire life, Lena. I recognize someone running from a past they can't outrun. The difference is, you don't have to run alone anymore." Sirens wailed in the distance. Louis's phone buzzed with incoming messages. The world was closing in, demanding decisions, consequences, explanations. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Not the one before, a different one. Private cell, private address. "I'm not asking you to work for me. I'm not asking you to explain who you were or what you did. I'm asking you one question. What if you didn't have to be invisible to be safe?" Lena looked at the card, at the man who'd seen her kill 4 people in under a minute and responded with gratitude instead of fear, at the possibility of something she thought was forever lost, being known and still being accepted. "I need time," she whispered. "Take it," Louis stepped back. "But Lena, time doesn't stop threats, and you have people looking for you. When you're ready to stop running, call me. We'll figure it out together." He walked toward the exit where Marcus had just arrived, leaving her alone in the wreckage. Lena sat in her studio apartment, the card on her kitchen table, her phone in her hand. For 3 days, she'd done what she always did, analyzed scenarios, calculated risks, planned escape routes. But for the first time in 7 months, escape felt like the wrong answer. She thought about Louis's question, about being invisible versus being safe, about the difference between hiding and living. She thought about the moment his eyes met hers across the destroyed restaurant, and he'd seen exactly who she was, a weapon, a survivor, a woman who'd killed to protect him and hadn't looked away. Lena picked up the phone. She dialed. On the 3rd ring, Louis answered. "Lena, I'm tired of being a ghost," she said quietly. "If your offer still stands," "It does. Then let's figure it out, together." She heard the smile in his voice. "When can you start?" Lena looked around her anonymous apartment, at the life she'd built from nothing, at the woman she'd become while hiding from who she'd been. "Now," she said, "I can start now. If this story of second chances and finding your strength touched you, thank you for being here.
These tales live through you. Smash like, subscribe, hit the bell, and drop a heart in the comments if you're glad Lena finally stopped running. It means everything. For the first time in 7 months, Lena Russ wasn't running, she was standing her ground.